Hey everybody, this is Perch, and reading in the mail. This is an interesting one. I'll answer it as honestly. I'll answer it honestly. May not be the answers you want to hear. I can't say everything I probably would like to say in this video, but I can say much. So the mail is basically from a viewer. Just who is in charge and what do they do? That's a quite a question right there. So it says, Perch, I know this might be an impossible request, but you've touched on this subject in past videos, specifically when addressing criticisms fans make about writers and some storylines that, let's just say, are not warmly accepted across the fandom. No idea what you mean there. Uh, that's the role of the editors who choose the writer and his or her pitch, or they, as you've said, seem largely shielded from any backlash. Are you privy to the behind the scenes machinations and the power structure at either Marvel and DC uh, that dictates the books that are being published? Specifically, who is a person issuing the order that 75 books must be published this week? Who decides what characters to focus on and what books to come out? And not in the John Kent sense. I see what you did there. Yeah. What kind of power responsibilities do the individual book editors have in the shaping of a particular title? Is there a traditional hierarchical structure within the company making these types of decisions? I know this is a rabbit hole kind of question, but I find your inside baseball videos the most informative and entertaining on your channel, besides, of course, your drunken rants. Thank you. I like the drunken rants. All right. Well, first off, um, and this may be an unsatisfactory answer. The short answer to the question, who is in charge, is kind of everyone and no one. And what I mean by that is that in a lot of cases, the creatives are making pitches, or somebody is coming in. Let's say, and I'll use an example that was in an interview that happened on this channel. You can go look up. This is basically Dan Didio approaching Jeff Thorne and some people, working with Dan Didio to say we'd like some pitches, and Jeffrey Thorne created some for Green Lantern, and then Dan Didio gets fired, and then months later, after Jeff Thorne thought it was over, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of stuff. Go back and listen to the interview with Jeff Thorne. He goes through the story perfectly. I'm doing it a disservice now by how I'm describing it, but basically, that months later, he gets called up, and then they want to salvage some of this stuff. He talks about kind of what was being planned for the 5G-ish thing they were doing, and then what became Future State and everything else. And so, why that story is useful is because what did we see there? We saw this kind of vague idea from, in this case, senior editorial, the creative head of the company in one regard, basically say, I'm looking for pitches sort of like this, give me something kind of like this. And then the writer then does some things, basically comes with a number of ideas. Editorial then changes, the names shuffle, things get lost, get found again. Editorial reaches out and says, hey, of all the pitches you gave us, I'd like to see more on this one. And so then the story gets shaped, and ultimately we see what we've got. Now, also what happens is as the book has begun, the power kind of shifts a little bit. Power maybe not the wrong word to use here, but the driving force behind the ideas tends to tilt a little bit in favor of the creator, because the editors are often working on multiple books, and their attention tends to go to the new books, tends to be the either the new books or the tentpole books, which are deemed have to get off the ground, and the ongoing books start to get less attention. Not none, not like it's completely left to the writer's devices, but it starts to get less, overall oversight, and starts to be driven a little bit more by the writer. Now, in this regard, this is my point of view, and it may not be yours, may not be the industry's, may not be anybody's, but my point of view is I like the role to remain consistent. If the editorial is going to be really involved in the kind of the pitch of the book and the creation of the book, then I think the editorial team needs to stay tightly engaged for the issue 6, issue 12, etc. I don't like the fact that we've stretched editorial so thin that they're kind of, weighting their work against what's most important at the time versus, shepherding a book. I think that's why we're seeing comic series kind of meander and go into random directions. I think it's also why some writers tend to, several issues in, get very, I don't want to say spicy, but try and do something that is going to jolt the attention again back onto their book, because they realize that the marketing arm of their company is not doing it for them anymore. So I mean, I just think it leads to a lot of bad behaviors. Now, there's a lot of writers who will tell you that they're happiest when editorial is leaving them alone, and I get that as well. I mean, lots of stories about Brian Michael Bendis who had very little contact with editorial at times, or contact that fit his schedule. You've heard Tom King talk. Again, this is not a secret. This is an open story about how he got the editor Mark Doyle taken off of his book because he had a disagreement, kind of bragged about it, much to the irritation of other editors, including Tom Brevoort. But in general, it's that kind of system where, and that's why I say, kind of everyone and no one is in charge. I do think, and like I've said in the past, and you alluded to in the email, that writers take an undue amount of the blame. And people like editorial, people like editors in chief, people like like Dan Buckley or for example at Marvel or Joe Quesada or others tend to skip off relatively unscathed with these kinds of things. And so it's a question: who's insisting that they put out 75 books a month? I mean, some combo between I think Quesada and Buckley is probably the answer there. Definitely, some people over in marketing and distribution have a lot to say about that, and they're looking at the volumes of what they need to do, and they're running their own math. Now, why this is also screwed up, I think, is because you have one group who is pushing we need this number of titles based on this amount of sell through in order to keep the numbers more or less looking how they're looking, and that's why we want to do 75 books a month. That group is, and I know people would disagree because I've said this and they've disagreed to my face, that group is disconnected from editorial. Whereas if they were more connected with editorial and it was more of a functioning business, that you would see things like, put it this way, using the Jeff Thorne example, he's on Green Lantern. Green Lantern #7 came out. It's a damn good comic. I'm sorry. Now, never mind. Some of you like it, some of you don't like it. No harm, no foul if you don't like the book. You're welcome to like whatever you want. But it's getting into some cosmic stuff now. It's got the New Gods in there, and shit, it's great. I'm all in on that. But he's building this kind of space epic, legacy with these characters. And if you're working high up in Time Warner or Warner Media, and you're about to put Dune out, which is now streaming on HBO Max, just recently came out, I might promote or do more with that Jeff Thorne Space Odyssey book because it's one of the closest things they have to Dune. It's not like Dune, but it's in the same basic genre. I'd be looking at ways on both ends to cross-promote. I certainly, when Dune is played on HBO Max, like if you're interested in some cosmic other things that aren't shows but comics and books, here's Green Lantern. You should go check that out. That's something I would do. On the same hand, what I would be doing right now is I'd be trying to maneuver. Could we get Thorne to pump out an extra annual or one shot or boost some part of this book up to take advantage of this moment in time, rather than say coming out with a King Shark limited series months after Suicide Squad has come and gone. Just saying. That's what I would be doing. So I think the fact these groups are not aligned means, who's making the decision? Well, an edict is coming down from somebody like, say, Buckley of we want to put out around 75 books or so. It's not a hard number. And generally speaking, things are slipping and coming in. So they're like, we're looking at something between like 70 and 80, and the number lands at 76, and that's what we get. You're getting a directive like that. And they're getting this other kind of softer directive from editorial saying things like, we need an event somewhere here in like May. I don't know. We need something that's going to shake up the status quo and maybe be nice if it involved She-Hulk in some way because, she's going to have this series better. Again, real example. You asked about conversations I've had. I'd like to think I'm reasonably plugged in. I think I talk to people that give me pretty good data. Not 100%, but, for what it's worth, not to pat myself on the back, I've predicted things pretty accurately. For a reason. I also keep my secrets. If somebody tells me, and they usually do, don't say anything, I don't say anything. It's hard when we do a live stream, people ask me a question, I know the answer to that, but I have to be like, hey, that's fun. But I get information at times because people trust that I keep my mouth shut because I do. So I keep getting information. But I'd like to think I'm relatively plugged in. I also think that my opinion on the matter, which is the company should work as a more functional unit where people are talking and working more together. There's a phrase in in Norway, and it says you're knocking on an open door, which means you're giving a suggestion that a lot of people agree with. They just, they don't know how to execute on this suggestion. And I think when I say things, as I have in the past to people in marketing or distribution or editorial, when I say things like, hey, you should work more together, you should get this synergy, I get this, yeah, we know. And I can say things like, so you want to do something about it then? Like, do you need some help? No, we've got it covered is almost always the answer. And of course, they don't have it covered. They don't have it covered for a variety of reasons, because they're understaffed, because, it's easier to do the same thing than to do something new. There's another expression called, you don't get fired for picking IBM. I don't know if I think it's now you don't get fired for picking Microsoft, as times have changed. But once upon a time, it basically meant IBM is not the sexy company. They're not producing the best stuff, but, you more or less know what they'll do. And if you are in IT or you're in a company and you pick IBM, you're not going to get fired if it goes wrong, because everybody's like, well, you did what any sane person would do. You picked the standard company that never goes wrong. It went wrong, but who could have foreseen that? Because it's IBM. Whereas if you put yourself out on a limb and you pick the more, young startup company that seems much better, has cooler features, would catapult you past the competition, but for whatever reason it goes wrong, you are likely to get questions of like, why in the hell did you pick this unknown company? Why'd you do that? That was stupid. Why didn't you pick IBM? Safe, conservative. That's what you should do. In many ways, that's how the comic industry works. It's just do what we've always done. Don't take risks. Don't do crazy things. Are some of these ideas that we have, like limited series aren't going to sell, or you need to make every comic new reader accessible, or any of the number of things I've talked about over the years, do they make sense? No, they don't make sense at all. There's plenty of business example proof, numbers, stats, everything else that proves that a lot of these ideas that people have are terrible, bad, old, legacy, shitty ideas. And yet they will keep doing those ideas. They'll keep running them because it's safer to go along with what's always been done than change. And that's the comic industry in a nutshell. The aggravating part of that is it is a creative, exciting, dynamic product that's in theory supposed to be what comes out the other end. You're supposed to be, comics is a place for the handcuffs to come off, unless you're, doing some kind of kinky stuff with you're an assistant editor with your boss. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not opening up that door again. I know what you're thinking there. No, the comics are supposed to be freeing, and in many ways they should be, because the money is also not there. When the money is not there, one of the advantages is, you can take more risks. You've got less to lose. Even worse, and I think this is the most damning thing of all, the business relationship, certainly with Marvel to Disney, but also DC to Warner, is such that you've got, Papa Disney or Papa Warner paying a lot of the bills. Now, they're still both companies are still laying people off and doing other things like that, but you've got a bank behind you. That's not something that, old Avatar or Mad Cave or Aftershock or some other publisher that starts with A has. They don't have that giant bank to draw on. As Marvel and DC, you do. Because you do, and they don't really care what you do, meaning they largely leave you alone. Why aren't you taking more risks? I mean, you almost can't have a better setup for a publishing house, these two, who are playing with someone else's money, and also are therefore they're in a safe position to disrupt the industry, to take risks, to do unique things. Unfortunately, a lot of the executives there are playing what this is a third expression in one video. They're playing blindfold politics, and what that means is people at the Jim Lee Marie level at DC and at the Quesada CV level, they're trying to play corporate politics with their owners, with the DC and Marvel folks. They have no ability to do it in the entity that they're in. They have neither the power, the exposure, or the ability to actually get in there and play politics. Sana Amanat, remember Sana? I haven't heard from Sana in a while. What's old Sana up to? Who knows? But Many of these people would love to be promoted and progress up to getting some of that sweet, sweet Disney stock and executive benefits and other things beyond what they currently get. They would all like this, but there's not really a route for them. They're kind of stuck in this weird limbo halfway place. Nobody should cry for any of these people. They've got a big check. They're doing great, but it's blind politics. They're not able to get in there and like mix it up with Ted or with some of the other, like the Parks and Resorts president, or none of them are they may see a Bob Iger for a screening of a movie, but they're not they don't have a route to Iger. They don't have a route to any of these people. They don't. This is one of the big fallacies of a lot of the videos that come out, which talk about, the Disney board's really upset about some of this, these Marvel comics. Disney board's not reading any of that stuff. That's always how you can sniff out that the video or the rumor you're getting is bullshit, because they're nowhere even close to that stuff. So who's making the decisions? A lot of people are making like 20% of the decision. I do absolutely believe that if somebody's going to take a swing at the writer, it's only fair that the editor also gets some heat for it, because the editor did have to, in many cases, solicited the pitch, in all cases, approved the pitch and put it into the book. I think it's patently unfair, by the way, extremely unfair, that when you see things like, the anti-Semitic stuff that showed up in the Hulk. And I see people bashing on Bennett. I see people attacking, in some cases, Al Ewing. An editor put that book out. It's weird how they always seem to get none of the blames. It's weird. Again, if you work in the tech industry, it would be like having a program manager where the project goes terrible. It goes off the rails. It fails. It's late. It's over budget. Everything is awful. And people just go in and they scream at the developers and the testers and the designers, and they say, "How could you have let this happen?" And and that's it. That's the goofy part. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Again, not a very satisfying answer, but it was an honest one. Hope that helps. Comments, questions, leave them below, and thanks for listening.